Cebinene has been sentenced to 5 years behind bars for multiple contraventions of the Cyber Crimes Act. He was charged for manipulating pornographic images by superimposing them on the faces of President Cyril Ramaphosa, Bekele and Ketla Sitole. He distributed the images via WhatsApp and even official presidency email channels. To talk about this is Tshepo Matseba, the Managing Director at Reputation First Group. Tshepo, good morning to you and welcome to the program. So we think about these incidents of cyber harassment and digital image manipulation and what impact they have on the reputation of public figures and institutions, particularly in an era when, you know, whatever you post goes viral in minutes. Just talk to us just more broadly about how often this happens and what potential risk it poses to those who are, well-known figures, for example.
Thank you so much and good morning to the viewers. The reality of digital and the world that we live in today means that every second, actually, anything can happen. And it happens, characterizes itself in multiple dimensions. Sometimes there are entities that will use, or individuals that will use your voice, sometimes your face, to promote their products and services, and the viewers often does not, or the social media user does not have the capability or the means to detect whether this is fake or fiction. And you'll see that when they use the broadcaster's face to promote a cryptocurrency product or service. But in the context that we are discussing right now, it gets worse because every day one is tempted to recreate content on platforms such as TikTok. And in recreating those platforms content, people often use voices of individuals, but more so they can also use your face. And in extreme cases, they will use the face of a president of a country. So the frequency upon which cyber misinformation and mischaracterization of an individual or a company or a country or a president can actually happen at any given point in time. And we've seen this with a number of messages that were published since President Cyril Ramaphosa had that meeting in the White House in the US, that there were many dimensions where people recreate content. They take old content and mix it together to create a story. But the danger for the brands and the individuals that are being crafted, or the stories whose stories are being retold differently, are very high and often long-lasting and hard to repair, especially given this one where somebody really superimposes your image against a pornographic image. Can be very damaging because we also do in the context of this have children. We've got clients, and every time they look at you, despite the reality that it was not factual, unfortunately perceptions stay in the human mind.
So given that then, from a reputation and nation branding perspective, how should public figures or even national institutions respond when faced with manipulated or defamatory content that spreads online?
Yeah, so the trick about reputation management is proactive engagement. Very often companies talk about crisis communication, but we often say perhaps the word is proactive crisis communication, where you consistently listen to what people are saying about you online. And the minute you pick up and you listen through things such as search engines, and you set up a simple search alert with your name and surname or the name of the company, and that allows you an opportunity to watch. You read what's happening in the news. You watch what's going on Twitter. And I know that it takes time. For companies, they can afford to appoint agencies and put systems to do the monitoring and listening. But for individuals, often tricky. That means you need to be aware and alert of what's happening in the media landscape, in the news and digital landscape worldwide on a regular basis, at least once a day. And so to preempt, to protect yourself from abuse and how to respond effectively, one of those things is to set up a rapid response mechanism. And for companies and for groups, for people like the presidents, you want to have a rapid response team that can actually proactively respond, because the sooner you respond, the better. Silence is often perceived as a mechanism, as an admission that that which has been purported to be true, the misinformation comes across as true, and that's where many brands struggle. Is that we take too long to respond. We engage with lawyers first. And by the time the legal team formulates an opinion, the issue has moved very quickly, and has become globally viral, because it is rapid, and digital is not only rapid, it is instant. And so at any given point in time, someone can really harm your reputation. And the way to respond effectively is to set up those rapid response teams and tell the version that is true quickly, and tell it the first time, because there's often no second chance or second bite at telling the truth. You often want to deal with it as soon as possible. And so I would encourage for companies and organizations, for the state, not to hold meetings for too long before they issue that first accurate statement.
We saw in the Nene case, for example, I mean, then there were a lot of, I would say, a kind of a minimization of the complexities, because he did admit once he was confronted that this was him and so on. So we'll talk about that aspect in terms of investigations in just a minute. But with encrypted platforms like WhatsApp, which is one of the channels that he used, being used to spread fake or manipulated images, what role can public institutions and brands and leaders play in building digital trust and resilience?
Yeah, so the trick about WhatsApp is that as a public institution, and WhatsApp and similar, because you've got other platforms that are being used like Signal. But in terms of this specific one, you want to start, charity begins at home. So you want to start by educating your employees. And mistakes that businesses and governments make is that they send out policies that say thou shalt not do A, B, and C. Thou shalt not do A, B, or say A, B, and C on these platforms. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. How it far more effective is to drive a continuous educational campaign within the context of your employees and your key stakeholders, even your suppliers, so that they are aware that they work with sensitive information. And sometimes their views are not necessarily going to assist the brand. And you reinforce this message through social media educational campaigns, as opposed to a prescriptive, rule of law, stick type of approach, that often doesn't achieve anything, because even if you give people restrictions in terms of policy, they use their own devices at home, and mistakes do happen. And you hope then that that message that you've taught in the context of an organization, that it will filter at home, so that your son, your daughter, your husband and your wife, your partner, that they don't also go and comment about a meeting that you held, a private meeting that you held at home, but they heard you because they were in the kitchen and you were in the lounge, and the houses are so small, and so information flows, and somebody goes and tweets or posts that information on a social media platform. So that's sort of the reality of where we are in terms of organizations and individuals and groups, that we're overly interconnected. Digital makes it impossible to have any private conversation. And some people think and believe when they were sending a voice note or a message on WhatsApp, that they were just talking to their friends or their network. But unfortunately, all of these are part of a digital footprint, because they are being downloaded. If they are not downloaded, they are being copied and pasted and uploaded somewhere else. And then the digital footprint that's very negative often lives for a long, long time, making it very difficult to reverse the situation.
Yeah, and perhaps just to close then, we spoke a lot about how to be proactive when your reputation risks damaging or being defamed. Talk to us just on the other side as well. I think this sentence does send a message to other people who might engage in these similar sorts of practices or are part of that chain of spreading disinformation or misinformation. How strong a signal does punishment like this send out into society in general?
Yeah, I think the punishment sends a significant signal. I think for a short period of time, it may actually deter those who use digital and social media for malicious purposes, but also those who may do so by mistake, thinking that they are just having fun or creating an entertaining piece of content and end up with serious consequences. The strategy or the key strategic driver of the future for a country like South Africa and for companies in South Africa and all the organizations that take their reputation seriously is to educate the public, is to educate people so that they are equipped. And in the process of education, you expect the social media platforms themselves, instead of publishing long guidelines that nobody has access to read or the time to read, that they actually, government should hold them accountable to actually the social media platforms themselves to actually create campaigns that help their own users to use social media responsibly, thereby minimizing a situation where we have to rely on court cases as a deterrent, but instead that we proactively teach the user to be responsible. And I think we allow too much leeway for social media owners in South Africa without giving them a little bit of responsibility and the much needed responsibility to educate.
Tshepo Matseba, thank you very much for your time this morning. We do appreciate it. He's the MD at the Reputation First Group.